got my laces tied. My trusty podcast by my side. If you wanna talk fun, it's the place to be. Yeah, it's the drop, D-R-O-P.
Today on the podcast, we are here with Andy Wynne, CEO of Nuyarn. Before we get started and into what all Nuyarn is about, I just want to say, hang on to this one. This is about Merino wool and about Nuyarn and their blend of Merino wool. And I'm a big Merino wool fan, so this is speaks to my heart. And I think if you're listening to this, you're going to learn a lot about it and it's how it can help you in your running and any other activity that you do. So I just wanted to preface it with that. Andy, let's get into it. Welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Robbe. Nice to meet you.
Yeah. So we're living on different sides of the world right now. I'm in, obviously, East Coast of the United States, for those who listen, and you are in New Zealand, correct?
That's right, yes. So we couldn't be further apart in terms of time. So I'm your tomorrow morning.
Oh man, that's right. It's not even today's morning. It's tomorrow's morning. That's quite the time zone change. So I wanted to first ask about your background because I like to get to know the guest a little bit before we get into what Nuyarn is about. So can you tell me who you are and where you're from originally and kind of how you're. Just a short background.
Sure, it's not very exciting, but I've been in this industry now for just nearing 30 years. Originally from South Africa, my family and I immigrated here 18, 19 years ago to New Zealand. Historically, I've been in the textile and clothing industry since a young man. And I have a bit of an odd skill set in that I understand textiles and apparel and brands, and there's very few of us in the world. And so when I arrived in New Zealand some 18, 19 years ago, I started to understand and get involved in merino product. And I must say that at that stage of my life and my career, I was fairly ignorant to wool and merino. My recollections of merino wool were sweaters that my grandmother had knitted for me, and those weren't very good memories. So
right.
I must say that some of the progression that I and the business that I'm with have made around merino wool and wool per se have come from a background of not knowing very much about it, and that's really enabled us to create different kinds of products. Because, to be fair, we've been a little bit ignorant and looked at this industry and this product base with fresh eyes. So that's a little bit of background on me.
Okay, so when you say you came from a family of textiles, or what does that even mean? Because I don't think you say it's not interesting, but I feel like that's not a typical upbringing. So what do you even mean by that?
Well, I cut my teeth in a business in South Africa that was a vertical business. So we used to knit fabric. We were making large volume apparel, and we had brands under license. So we were a vertical natured business that was producing large volumes of circular knit, cotton and blended products, creating very, very large volumes of product, mostly shipped to the United States under the then African Growth and Opportunity Act, which gave us access to the US, quota-free, duty-free, and we had brands under license. And so on the commercial side of that business, I had the ability to understand a vertical natured business, which has really enabled me in my career to take those learnings and implement them in our business.
Okay, so you started learning about Merino. And for those who don't know or aren't super familiar with Merino, because like you said, I think a lot of people, when they think wool, they think that itchy sweater that your grandma made, which is what I thought originally as well. Um, and so when we hear about merino, which does come from merino sheep, which does come from New Zealand, what makes that different?
Well, let me share my experience with you. I surrounded myself with a team of specialists some years ago, and we were going to push hard into this merino wool and wool category. And so it was important that we familiarized ourselves and appraised ourselves with the true performance of this fiber. And so we started to get on farm, speak to growers and farmers, speak to technical people in the know. And besides the inherent qualities of merino wool, which come from a merino sheep, which is a fine micron sheep, which has historically gone into the finer end, higher value end of apparel through suitings, etc. Besides that, we sort of learned the obvious, that it's thermoregulating, so it keeps you warm, keeps you cool, that it is naturally flame retardant. What was one of the biggest drivers for us was that, besides it being the DNA of merino wool being close to, or keratin, which is the closest thing to keratin is human nails and human eyelashes. So if you're going to have a second skin, let it be keratin, not petroleum.
Mm-hmm.
Besides all of these favorable attributes to the fiber, we learned something staggering going back, I don't know, 16, 17 years ago. And that is that wool has the capacity to absorb moisture from vapor stage, like very few other fibers. And so, if you're a runner or a golf player, or whatever the performance sport that you participate in, the body starts to warm, it emits vapor. Most other fibers like polyester or nylon or cotton, etc., has to wait until that vapor turns into droplets of perspiration before it can absorb it. And we learned that wool has this natural capacity to absorb moisture from vapor stage, which is one tier before any other fiber can absorb it.
Mm.
And so, we were looking at the way that the world was making yarn at that stage, and you take this phenomenal fiber and you twist it into a rope-like structure, and then you make it very, very difficult for that moisture to get into that structure or to get
Mm.
out. And so, I mean,
Right.
think, for instance, you got a mug of coffee, you knock it over, you get a tea towel, you can pick most of the coffee up. The tea towel will absorb most of it. But if you turn that tea towel into a rope-like structure and you try and clean the coffee up, it won't absorb a lot of it. And then once the moisture's in that structure, it's difficult to get it out. And
Mm-hmm.
so we were of the opinion that the world thinks of wool as a winter product, because that's always where it's historically sat. And that's because
Right.
of the limitations in spinning. So, because you can only get a certain fineness of yarn, and not as fine as the performance world wants, you know, you're in 160, 170, 180 gram entry level wool, and that is a winter item. And that's a base
Mm-hmm.
layer to keep you warm mostly. And
Mm-hmm.
we wanted to unlock the natural characteristics of wool. So what we wanted to do was we wanted to create yarns, or we wanted to take this phenomenal fiber and we wanted to take it into performance apparel, with the intention of creating product for summer, or for different forms of performance in hot climates. And so what makes wool different to other fibers is that it's a natural product. Um, the DNA of it is keratin, so the closest thing to keratin is human nails and eyelashes.
Hmm.
It'll keep you warm, it'll keep you cool. It's thermoregulating in nature. And so what we wanted to do was, as a business, was take these learnings and see how we could use these learnings to create product for an industry or industries that are always crying out for new innovation and technology.
Hmm.
And so, what we were, no one else in the world was talking about the capacity of wool to absorb moisture from vapor stage. And so, what we as a business wanted to do was we wanted to take this phenomenal fiber and find a different way to create a yarn that would enable us to produce textile and apparel that is lighter in weight, that isn't a twisted way of creating this yarn structure, which has been the way that wool has been made for decades. And in
Right.
doing that, we wanted to create, a new performance apparel driven around wool.
Yeah, I think that's pretty amazing. Because now I've been running in merino wool for 7 years, though, or maybe a little bit longer. But now some of that is quite often in run apparel, especially. You'll see stuff that's like 50% merino, 50% polyester, or 47% polyester, 3% spandex. So you'll see kind of a merino blend, but oftentimes it's not really, there's not too much that's like 100% merino. Um, so can you talk about how, and I think a reason for that is because you still want that kind of like performance aspect mixed with like the temperature regulating and anti odor aspect. So how does your technology help in that situation, especially with like athletic performance as compared to a typical merino blend?
So, Robbie, we used to be knitters and apparel manufacturers before we were spinners. And the reason we got into spinning was because we couldn't get the industry to give us a satisfactory yarn to deliver what we knew the industry was looking for, or industries.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we were, as a company, we were buying intimate blends. And so, you've got wool blended with polyester or wool blended with nylon or tencel,
Right.
etc. And then you put that into a rope-like structure, and it really doesn't give you the real benefit of a performance product. And so you still somewhat limited around weight, and you definitely limited in the mechanism that the yarn is made in this rope-like structure, this twisted structure. And so
Mm-hmm.
we've come from an era of buying those products. And so what we wanted to do was, listening to performance athletes, we knew that we had to create elasticity, and we wanted to do that without using spandex, because the industry was telling us that using spandex creates weight, and that spandex will absorb up to 2.5 times its original weight, and it will retain that weight. So you've got the elasticity around the contours of the body, but you've got this blend of
Mm-hmm.
utilizing spandex that will absorb vast levels of moisture. And so we wanted to create a yarn that had elongation to give us elasticity with no spandex. Number two is we wanted to be able to have a twist-free yarn structure, and we didn't know how could do that, because without the twist, all the wool just falls out.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And then we wanted something that was going to last, because a lot of the consumers that were speaking to us were saying to us, "Oh, I've bought this brand of shirt. I've washed it 3 times and it's got a hole in it, or it's got
Mm-hmm.
vast levels of spirality. It twists on the body after laundering." And so, we were looking at this and saying, okay, well, the desires and aspirations of a performance merino has to be light in weight, vast levels of elasticity with no spandex, doesn't develop holes, has no spirality, and with the twist-free structure can absorb moisture from vapor stage and dry quicker. And so,
Mm-hmm.
we started looking at how we could create that yarn structure. And so, in creating these machines and this spinning technology that we then called Nuyarn, we were able to draft a two-ply yarn. So that the industry mainly uses a single yarn, and we use a two-ply yarn, which is a big advantage to durability and longevity. And so we were able to draft wool fibers around a very, very fine filament in a two-ply yarn structure. And really, we keep them together with an S, a neutral, a Z, a neutral, an S. And so we were able to create this structure, and also to create much finer yarns than the industry had ever seen before. In mostly blends of around a 90-10 wool nylon, using this filament to create the integrity of the product. And in doing that and testing elasticity, we quickly learned that by really being extremely smart with the filaments that we use, we could gain that huge level of elasticity. And so the participant and the athlete would have a t-shirt, for instance, that had vast amounts of elasticity around the contour of the body. And so there's a direct
Mm-hmm.
correlation around comfort and elasticity. No spandex. So we didn't have the issue of weight or moisture absorption and retention of moisture. Because it was a twist-free yarn structure, we started to measure the moisture absorption and dry time. We're drying 5 times quicker than any other wool product on the market.
Oh wow.
Uh, we we also had an advantage around UPF, so we knew that the participants wearing our running gear would be running outside in the open, and going back to 2013, when we were really cutting our teeth with this technology, we knew that UPF would continue to be a big deal. In those days, we were all talking about ozone, etc., and the impact that outside activities were having on athletes, etc. And so these were all important drivers for us. So what we were able to create is product that was much lighter, product that had vast levels of elasticity, product that dried much quicker, and product that lasted a lot longer. And so we were trying to mimic what would happen, with participants wearing a shirt, athletes wearing a shirt, and we were using sort of martingale abrasion tests. And conventional wool, 100% merino wool, was developing a hole at about 14,000. Coarse spun, which has been around forever, which is
Mm-hmm.
basically a rope like wool put around a nylon filament, vastly different to a Nuyarn technology that was sort of developing a hole at about 18, 19,000 rubs. And Nuyarn was getting north of 70,000 rubs. In some instances, in a much lighter weight, we were getting to 115,000 rubs on a martingale
Mm.
abrasion test, which is sandpaper, before the product developed the hole. So yeah, it was a hugely exciting process and journey, because we knew that there was going to be demand. We just knew that we couldn't compromise on what we were going to develop. So
Yeah.
we didn't want to make adaptations to existing machines, because everyone's tried that. We didn't want to use existing twisted wool and use chemical additives to make it behave
Mm.
differently, etc. So we wanted something that was chemical free, would deliver those attributes until the product went to landfill, and that was sort of a zero compromise in what we were doing.
Yeah, I love that. And I've used New Yarn in a variety of products or apparel for my own running. I've used the Artilect Boulder, or I'm sorry, flat iron long sleeve for a lot of my winter running. It's probably my favorite um, base layer for running. And I've also used True, TREW.
Yeah.
I when I used one of their T-shirts for traveling a lot, because I feel like that's, I mean, Merino is just so versatile that for traveling, here, for instance, when we were going to, where was it? Italy, I think last year, and our bags got lost. But since I was wearing a merino wool shirt, I could wear it for 2 or 3 days, and it didn't it didn't smell because it's the anti-odor properties are so good, and it's obviously
Yeah.
very comfortable. So it's like the best thing to wear when traveling.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't get on a plane in anything but merino wool unless you're traveling with 2, 3 t-shirts and you can, try and, change them out in airports, etc. So no, that makes a huge difference in terms of a travel shirt in a merino Nuyarn product because it's light in weight, it's comfortable, you got the odor free advantage, etc. Absolutely, and I mean it doesn't just lend itself to a t-shirt. I mean, it goes that that we we do a lot of underwear, boxer brief, long john into
Oh
t-shirts, into
yeah.
mid-layer products, etc. And so it really lends itself into that entire capsule. And running is one of the biggest growing categories for us, not only in apparel but in footwear as well. So it's an exciting category with very, very passionate athletes that are really willing to try anything that's new and performance driven.
Yesterday I was wearing the Artilect base layer like long underwear because it's whenever it gets to 32 degrees Fahrenheit or I guess 0 Celsius. I basically that's a long underwear season for me because so I just throw them on because you don't get hot in them. They're thermoregulating. So if it's you're outside or inside, you're just warm the whole time. It's great. And then I also, yeah, like I don't think we turned the heat on in our house just yet. So I like sleeping in the cold. So I would wear my for real, like last night, I was wearing my Nuyarn long sleeve shirt just like to sleep in, and it was great. It's not you don't get overly hot in it. It's just nice and comfortable. Um, so I wear it like all the time, especially in the wintertime, especially when running. It's really one of my favorite products, and New Yarn especially. I feel like does such a good job of regulating the temps between just like such a wide range of temperatures and activities, whereas some of the other merino or merino blends I have are good for a certain amount of time or a certain temperature range. But then like once you get outside of those that range, it gets either too hot or too cold. And so I feel like, and another one that I love is Ibex. I really love some of the stuff that they make. One of my favorite jackets, which I'm not sure has New Yarn, but their Wool Air jacket is like my favorite jacket of all time. And so yeah, I just I love everything that wool is, I guess, or at least, and especially New Yarn.
Yeah, and there's a lot that goes into it, Robbie, because we've had to become specialists if we want to be the best in the industry, or have a technology that is vastly different to anything else. We have to be enormously strict on the sourcing of raw materials, and so
Right.
we set down some ambitious parameters around the specifications that we will have in our business, and we pay a large premium for that, and that is that we don't want very short fibers in the wool, which create a lot of challenges around hairiness, etc. We don't want the very long fibers that are a broader micron that create that itchy, scratchy.
Mm-hmm.
We also have the benefit of not creating a rope So all of those fibers in Nuyarn don't stand up and prickle you, and that's what causes the itchy prickle factor. And so
Okay.
there's a lot that goes into there's a lot that goes into the secret sauce of Nuyarn, and that really starts at fiber selection going all the way through, and the uh, the manufacturing partners that we do business with have got a real tough challenge in meeting those expectations, and those are zero deviation specifications, and so there's a lot that goes into it to deliver an exceptional product.
And I think that's what a lot of people don't realize sometimes, because some of the products I mentioned, I'll put them in a roundup that's like best long sleeve running shirts or best, winter gear or things like that. And people were like, oh, yeah, like I'm going to spend $100, $120 on a long sleeve shirt. And I'm like, trying to explain, like, this is the, you could buy something that's $30 or $40, right? So that's not wool, and it's gonna smell after 2 months of wearing it. You got to wash it every time. It's made of synthetic fibers that are gonna get into the water and everything else. And that's fine if you want to do that, or if you actually want the best, it's like you can spend, like you said, maybe it's $100, $120, depending on what you're buying, a long sleeve merino shirt that you can wear 3 or 4 times before you wash it, because it's not going to smell and it's not going to stretch out and it's not going to be, it's going to dry quickly. It'll last for an incredibly long time. It instead of buying multiple layers that you have to wear, like a jacket and another layer, and swapping them out and mixing them up, you have one piece that can do so many things. And I try to make this justification to people, but sometimes I feel like it's difficult to do that. Do you find it's like frustrating sometimes to to make people understand, like, no, this is actually the best value. It costs more money, but you're getting more value out of it in the long run.
I mean, we in business, a lot of it is strategy, and there is an element of luck in business. And if you'd sat me down 15 years ago and asked me to articulate the customers that we would have today, I would have got it very wrong. We're in a very fortunate position to sell to some of the best brands in the world, and they've approached us to commence a discussion around how we can deliver an exceptional product for them. And so we do have frustrations, because we look at the industry, and runners are, they go out and they buy a really good pair of running shoes from one of the top brands. They pay top dollar for those running shoes, and then what they do is that at the checkout they buy a pair of nylon lycra socks for $9.99 or $10, and really, that is going to you know create the perception of how good or bad that shoe is.
Yeah.
And after that synthetic product, and I'm look, there's a place in the world for everything, right? So, but that synthetic product will start to develop heat. It will create blisters. It will have an impact to the condition and the health of the surface of the skin. Whereas, if you bought a merino running sock or a Nuyarn merino running sock, you would have a sock that absorbs moisture, dries quicker, reduces the risk of blisters, because you don't get a temperature burn like you will with a potentially a nylon lycra sock, etc. And so
Yeah.
sometimes we sit there and it's like, hey, you've just bought a Ferrari, why put a set of bad tires on the Ferrari? Because the,
Yeah.
the Ferrari is just not going to perform to the same, as
Hmm.
as it would with a great pair of tires. And we look at it in cycle as well, where you have people buying frames for downhill bikes at $8,000, etc. And then what socks do they wear, etc. And so and the apparel is the same thing, like a running shirt. The industry runs in polyester or polyester lycra, and that's fine. But
Mm-hmm.
when when you take your running shirt out of the washing machine and you're about to dry it and it smells like you haven't washed it,
Mm-hmm.
the only good thing for that product is landfill, and it's not good for the landfill either. And so, yeah, I mean, there are some frustrations, and for us, all we've got to do is get somebody to wear one of our products once, and it's game over. It's just that they won't wear anything else, and so it's just
Mm-hmm.
getting them to make that commitment. I mean, a bigger frustration, Robbie, is our industry has a lot of people in development roles that rely on our industry to guide them and direct them in terms of the right fabrics and the right microns and how to get the right comfort factor, etc. And it's not as good as it should be. And so,
Mm-hmm.
there will be brands that are reliant on businesses to create textile for them and go back and create the right yarns for them, and there'll be an element of cost, etc., and that athlete would potentially get a bad experience, and then think, okay, well, all wool is the same, all merino is the same. I won't be trying this again. That wasn't a very good experience. It was itchy or scratchy, or it was developed a hole soon, or after laundering,
Mm-hmm.
it got developed spirality, etc. And so, yeah, we push really, really hard on making sure that it's not just this unique spinning technology that delivers the outcome. It's also the sourcing of the merino, and the sourcing and the managing and the policing of specifications. And there's many people that can't do business with us or supply us. They're just not good enough, and that's fine,
Mm.
because
Yeah.
we have to develop comfortable high performance product day in and day out, and
Mm-hmm.
that's not a negotiation. So some of the frustrations in our industry are just around, you go to an ultra marathon, and you see people after the race, and the moisture on the surface of the skin is definitely there, and so they've been running in a polyester spandex top. The surface of the skin is still very moist. The shirt is wet, and then they stop running, and then the temperature of the body crashes,
Mm-hmm.
and they're
Yeah.
cold. And
Yep.
so, for us, some of the frustrations are, hey, my friend, if you only wore this product, you would have had such a different experience, because if we can drag away the moisture from vapor stage from the next to skin, and we can keep the surface of the skin drier, what we
Mm-hmm.
deliver is a remarkable advantage to a runner, where you might be running in the sun, you might be running in the shade, you might be running in uh, a windy condition or a non-windy condition, etc. And or you might have all of those in one run.
Mm-hmm.
And we know that the body will burn more energy to keep warm than it does in exerting and running. And so
Mm-hmm.
if we can keep the surface of the skin dry, we can stop those vast swings of temperature crash on the surface of the skin. And in doing so,
Yeah.
the athlete has got more in the tank at the end of the run than they would normally have, because the body hasn't had to
Yeah.
consume that energy to keep drying. So those are some of the frustrations we have, is just to say, just put this on and wear this once, and you won't wear anything else.
Yeah. No, I feel you. Yeah, personally, the gear I mentioned before, it's always surprising to me how adaptable it is. Like I said, that like that Ibex jacket that I have, I wear that from like 25 Fahrenheit to 70. It's insanely versatile. It's pretty much windproof, and it's like the only, I'll layer it with other merino or whatever, but if it gets even colder, but it's just such a versatile piece of gear and that's what I love about like especially the Art Elect long sleeve that I use, where like when you're running, runners will know what I'm talking about. When you're getting, when you know, you're a little bit cold at first, and then you get into that like mile 1 or 2 when your body starts to warm up, and it feels like you're going to overheat, but in a normal long sleeve shirt, you just start sweating, and it's like becomes too much, and then you're like rolling up your sleeves and doing all this other stuff. But with Merino, it feels like you're about to get too hot, and then it suddenly like evens out. It's like because it allows that vapor to release instead of, you know, bottling it up and then getting all wet, and then you get cold, and then, so it's like always amazing to me how it adjusts as your temperature, you know, as your effort gets harder, as you get hotter, and it's almost magical in a way, because it feels like I'm always surprised at how well it regulates temperature between, you know, wide ranges, I guess.
Those were our findings years ago when we decided that if we were going to play in the space and we were going to be the best in the business, we had to understand the fiber intimately. And so it's a fantastic outcome when you can create product with this fiber and you can unlock those natural characteristics, as opposed to using a petroleum based product that you've got to plow with chemistry.
Mm-hmm.
And I can tell you today that my experience in this industry is that irrespective of what chemical you use, and you can brand it however you want around how fast it's going to dry, granular washing powder is extremely robust. And
Mm-hmm.
granular washing powder today, in any circumstance, will remove, or domestic laundering will remove any chemical additive within a short space of time. And
Hmm.
so, you know, best you buy product that will behave and perform like that for the life of the product, as opposed to being reliant on chemical,
Yeah.
which isn't great for the environment either. So, yeah, no,
Right.
I think that your experiences are spot on. I mean, just, you know, odor free, thermoregulating, you know, just, you know, from our perspective, you know, we would go and see brands around the world and they would ask us to develop weights and performance product for various categories, and we just couldn't give them anything. And we'd meet with
Mm-hmm.
spinners and we'd sit them down and tell them what we needed around the gauge of knitting machines that we had, and they'd come back to us 6 months later with a cone of yarn, and we forgot why we'd asked for it. And so we just said, okay, well, this has to change. So if we're gonna control our destiny, we have to be, you know, we have to be the
Yeah.
best, because there was this massive void in spinning technology. There was
Mm-hmm.
nobody that could give us the product that the industry was looking for, and it was
Mm-hmm.
consumer driven and brand driven. That there was this gaping need for this product, and there was nobody that could deliver it. And so we, you know, 18, 17 years ago, you know, we didn't want to be a business that was vertical and was spinning as well, but through the needs of our industry and the requirements of athletes and brands, you know, we were either going to do it and do it properly, or we weren't going to do it at all. And so
Yeah.
that's been a bit of our journey.
Real quick question. What is the difference between different fibers? Because I've worn, let's see, regular merino, just regular wool. When it comes to running, I've done alpaca wool. I've done, especially for socks, I've done yak wool. So can you tell me or our listeners what the difference is between the different fibers, or why merino is better than those other ones?
Yeah, I don't. I We're not 100% wool business, and so
Mm-hmm.
we will sit down with a brand and we will hear what they want to do, what they want to create, and there are ways for us to use our spinning technology to deliver the expectations of what the brand's looking for, because their consumer is asking for it.
Okay.
So so
So
there's
theoretically, oh, sorry. So theoretically, you can work with other wools than merino. So could you also work with yak or alpaca wool as well?
Yeah, and we do blend alpaca with our
Oh,
wool
okay.
for a brand in the US, and have done. We also blend tencel with wool, etc.
Hmm.
For a running brand features in the US, and so
All right.
we do have um, we do push very very hard on technical performance and also environment. So we don't want to be using
Hmm.
something that's not clever or hasn't been produced particularly well in terms of environmental standards. But there are other fibers that um, can be used to deliver a cool touch or an elevated thermal advantage, etc. And so most of the product that we produce is mostly wool. Um, we we have looked at this industry of ours, and we have listened to a large amount of brands, and a large many brands use nylon as a fiber because it's very durable. So for
Right.
instance, in the heel and the toe of a sock, nylon is knitted into those areas because
Hmm.
it stands up to the abrasion of the running shoe, for instance. And you can't put merino in those areas. It's just the fiber structure isn't meant for
Right.
high impact zones. And so we looked at this for many years, and we're the only business in the world that's been able to take flooring industry wool that has historically gone into carpets or upholstery,
Hmm.
and repurpose that and use it as a high impact zone or in high impact zone areas. So, for instance,
Okay.
military applications for elbow, shoulder, the back of a garment because of backpacks, etc.,
Hmm.
or the heel and the toe of a sock where we can swap out the nylon for what we call Herculan, which is a technology where we use a carpet wool, and that carpet wool is extremely durable. And if you have wool carpets in your home, you'll replace those carpets after 20 years, not because you've worn them out, but because you're sick of seeing the same colors or potentially the same stains in the carpet. So,
Right.
enormously durable. And so our spinning technique and technology, Nuyarn, makes it possible for us to spin very, very long fiber lengths. So as a business, we mostly are reliant on a wool platform, and then we use different microns to deliver comfort or durability, longevity, moisture absorption, etc. So because we're
Okay.
vertical in the sense, we can go back to fiber selection in our business. So if we talk about yak or alpaca, for instance,
Hmm.
or other forms of man-made fibers like a tencel, for instance, really no good and bad. They do it all in their own have a unique attribute to offer to that textile. But Robbie, we've learned over the years to stay away from voodoo science and what's not real. We
Hmm.
very much back ourselves to give consumers what's real, measurable, and an acceptable product. And we more often than not always fall back onto using a merino or a wool
Yeah.
product with a filament. It's just proven and tested, and the responses and the feedback are not varied.
Yeah. No, I love that. I mean, um, yeah, and I feel like you've done a really good job. You said where you're at now, you couldn't imagine some of the brands or markets you'd be getting into. What are some of those brands? I know I've mentioned a few. Are there any that I'm missing that you've worked with? Because I know there's like Black Diamond. I think on the footwear side, you've done Hoka and Allbirds. Is there any others that I'm missing?
Yeah, we do business with a unique running brand in Denmark called Lipati. We do a
Hmm.
lot of business in Japan with Montbell. We
Okay.
do a lot of business with a hunting brand called, which obviously isn't a run brand, called Kuyu in California.
Okay.
Um, we have a really interesting array of customers. You've mentioned Artelect. We do a lot with a brand in China called Autopia, who are a running brand and are a
Hmm.
direct to consumer and have their own retail and are growing very, very quickly. We do business with Lebent.
Oh
Um,
yeah.
you know, we've got a really, really interesting array of customers. We do some travel product for Western Rise. You mentioned travel apparel.
Yep.
We do business
Yeah.
with Saliwa in Italy, or Autovox in Germany, Odlo in Switzerland.
Hmm.
Um, we're very fortunate. We do a lot of business with Kathmandu in Australasia. That's New Zealand and Australia. 776 BC is probably the most innovative paddling rowing brand in the world.
Oh wow.
The North Face in Japan, etc. So we're in a very fortunate position where we not only have got very, very solid brands that we deal with, we've got under very, very controlled development processes. We've got 28 brands that we're working with who are very, very innovative brands. And these innovations are with some of the biggest brands in the world, creating new footwear, new socks,
Hmm.
new running apparel. We are really that company that sit down with a brand and clearly hear what they're trying to solve and go about creating it for them. We're not really that business where people come to us and say, "Oh, we're buying this product from ABC. Can you give us a Nuyarn version?" So
Hmm.
there's seldom a like for like. We'd knock 30, 40 grams out of the product and give them something that's better and higher in performance, etc. But no, I mean we're in a very, very fortunate position in our business where we've managed to be, if brands approach you and you're able to give them something that supersedes their expectation, to give to their consumers, I think that
Yeah.
continues to keep you relevant.
Another question I had was, why is it? I can never figure this out. Why is it that most merino comes from New Zealand? Because why can't, why doesn't it come? Why aren't there huge merino sheep farms in the U.S. or other places? Or maybe there are, but
So there's a merino band in the world, and so Australia, New Zealand, South Africa, and Argentina produce most of the merino wool in that merino band. Similar,
oh
uh,
man, okay.
similar. So the vast majority of merino wool actually comes out of Australia, followed by New Zealand, and then South Africa or Argentina. And so we source a lot out of New Zealand. We source out of Australia. We have that conversation with the brand to make sure that we aligned in terms of location of source. All of the wool that we buy is RWS certified, so that gives us the sleep at night factor, that on farm practices, animal welfare, and those sort of important components are adhered to. And
Yeah, because it. Sorry, real quick. It, in case people don't know this, there's, in the past there used to be, and I guess currently, depending what brand you use, there's a practice called is it musel or mulesed?
Emulsing, yes, where in the past and in years gone by, what they would do is they would remove some of the wool around the rear end of the sheep, and that was to stop the sheep from developing fly strike in summertime, where
Mm-hmm.
that would not be a very good outcome for the sheep in later years. And so through breeding mechanisms and on-farm controls and a whole host of initiatives in New Zealand, that's been mostly or all of what's dealt with. So as a business since 2011, we've bought non-mulesed wool. We weren't prepared to get into a discussion whether it was right or wrong or anything like that. We aren't farmers. We don't understand the pain that they go through, and we didn't want to have a debate around, what was right or wrong. And so,
Mm-hmm.
pre Nuyarn even, we've driven that very, very hard. And so, I think that, for the better part of the industry, I think that the industry has made significant inroads into improving animal welfare, etc.
Mm-hmm.
And so, we can be fortunate in New Zealand, where we source a lot of our wool from, that it's a mules-free zone, and has been for some years now, which is an advantage to how we market and sell our product. I mean,
Yeah.
at the same time, Robbie, there's also, like anything, social media, is a free for all, and there's an element of not poor understanding, and motivated entities that go out and tell a different story.
Mm.
That's
Yeah.
not that's not well aligned with actual practice.
Yeah, yeah, I kind of sensed that when I was digging into it last year. I was like, it's very hard to uh, parse who has exactly what the angle is and who's telling the story. So,
Absolutely.
yeah, so it is. Yeah, that's interesting. Um, yeah, I was thinking, man, I was just thinking about this out of my head. So this is a crazy question, but why is why is wool such a good fiber, like compared to say other hair or animal like protection? You know what I mean? Like what makes it so great? Is there anything that's even comparable in other animals? Because that'd be nice if you could just go to a barber shop or something and sweep up the floor and use that as a fiber, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Yeah. Well, I in my experience, sort of, laboratory mad scientist kind of stuff, we years ago, I didn't believe, I needed some convincing around the thermoregulation of wool.
Mm-hmm.
And I was with a very old professor who took some wool out of some greasy wool, and some processed wool, put it into a container, and put a temperature probe into the wool, and it was ambient temperature. So, say for instance, the room was 65 degrees Fahrenheit. And so put a temperature probe in 65 degrees Fahrenheit. Um, then sprayed it with a fine form of mist and put it back in the same container, and put the probe in. And the wool rose 3 degrees, 5 degrees Fahrenheit in temperature by itself.
Oh
And
wow.
so the you know it became abundantly clear to me that this fiber, nobody was telling the real story about this fiber, potentially because you couldn't take what was happening in nature and deliver it onto someone's back.
Mm-hmm.
And so, what my experience with this product is around, um, you know the sheep in on a farm in high country New Zealand, etc., have this enormous capacity to stay warm, to stay cool, etc.,
Mm.
through this incredible fiber. And so, the important components of the wool, and what we discovered, as we've spoken about, is, moisture absorption from vapor stage is a big deal. Okay, this is especially for you as a runner. you know
Mm.
Being able to take the moisture away from the surface of the skin from vapor stage is an enormous deal, as opposed to having to wait for it to turn into a droplet of perspiration.
Yeah.
And I used to have these fights here years ago with big brands, which would get a fabric out that was a Nuyarn fabric, in wool, and get a polyester fabric out, and they take a dropper, and they drop a bit of wool on, I mean, a bit of water on both, and the polyester would absorb it and disperse it, and the droplet would sit on the surface of the Nuyarn, and then get absorbed. And I said, no, but this is the wrong, let's get some
Right.
water vapor. Let's see how smart polyester is with absorbing water vapor. Well, it can't, and the wool can. And so, what do from my perspective, the true unique attributes of merino wool and why we've pushed so hard around merino wool is one, it's keratin based, right? So why wouldn't you have keratin as your second skin? Two, it can absorb moisture from vapor stage if it's been put into a yarn in a mechanism that enables it to do so, not a rope-like structure. So that's Nuyarn is very, very alone. I mean, is a unique technology in that sense. You know, elasticity with no spandex. Because spandex is a killer. So there were all of these attributes that wool has. It was just how do you unlock that and deliver that to a consumer and a brand to be able to, for wool to behave as close in a sport activity as it does in nature, and that's not easy. And so I'm very, very heavily biased towards merino wool and wool. I believe that there's very, very few competing technologies or fibers in the world that can compete with it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, I don't want to keep you too long, but I could talk about wool for way too long. We should probably get a beer sometime and just talk about it for like 3 hours. That'd be cool. Uh,
Absolutely. Well, we need to be in the
oh,
same location because if you start drinking at 5 o'clock, that's 9 in the morning for me. So
that's true. Might be frowned upon unless it's a Saturday and you're watching a football game or something.
absolutely. When I'm in the East Coast again, Robbie, I'll look you up and we can have a beer. Absolutely.
Okay, that sounds great. Well, yeah, thanks for coming on. It was great hearing everything about Nuyarn and about Merino. I hope it's educational for all our listeners. And I know I always enjoy learning something new about it. No pun intended. But I'm looking forward to testing even more gear in the future. And yeah, just continue to do what you guys are doing because I think it's really awesome.
Well, we've got some staggering technologies that we are bringing to market with some very
Ooh.
powerful brands, and so hopefully you can follow that journey of ours, and a large amount of that is in that run category. So we'll keep you appraised with our progress.
Okay, great. It was good talking to you, Andy. I'll see you soon.
Likewise, thank you so much for your time.
Good stretch, got my laces tied. My trusty podcast by my side. If you wanna tuck run, it's the place to be. Yeah, it's the drop. DROP.